Something new to try.
I quite like that.
You quite like it?
Yeah.
It's a new addition. For those of you tuning in on YouTube, you will see and you will notice we have made adjustments to the Granny Studio. We're going with a new vibe this week. Bit of Matt's idea, you see. He's the production manager this week. Welcome back to episode 7 of the New Levels Coaching podcast. Absolutely delighted and honoured to be joined by my good friend Matthew Wood, who many of our audience will know from RunThrough events. Matt is a very good friend, a long-term friend, and it's quite fitting that we're back here in Loughborough, because that's where our running journey started together, although we used to compete against each other at a very young age. Yeah. I believe our paths first crossed when we were around about 15, Matt.
Probably, yeah. It was a young time. It was great back then, competing against each other at that level. We were so competitive, but I think the first time I actually came across you and actually had a conversation with you was at Loughborough University in the student union, where you bounced over to me all happy and said, "You're Matt Wood, aren't you?"
Well, you were a celebrity in my mind. You were famous. We'll go on to that about how we met and how we got carried away in our first week of university training, and maybe how we still get carried away now and excited with projects, and particularly passion projects. So what is this podcast all about? Well, before we go on to that, I wanted to introduce Matt and to give you a bit of a background around his running background and where he is now with his running and with life in general. As I said, Matt was a very good runner when I came to university. I classed him as God, really. He was a bit of an inspiration to me. He was a northern lad who was doing really well, really high up on the UK rankings. For those footballers who are tuning in, Matt actually broke a British record that was held by the Welshman Gareth Bale. It was a British indoor record, I believe.
Yeah. I was actually in the Times. There's a little article. I've got that, and every time my mates from back home see Gareth Bale mention this article of me. Well, it was actually Gareth Bale ran 4:08 for 1,500 metres when he was 16. The British record was held by Matt Wood at 3:59. And it wasn't entirely accurate because it was the indoor record rather than the outdoor record, but I'm taking it.
So you had the British record and they were comparing Gareth Bale to you.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, got you. See, Gareth Bale is no Matt Wood. That's what we're saying. Gareth Bale can hit a golf ball though. I seen him at the Ryder Cup recently. Anyway, we digress. But Matt and I met at Loughborough University, and as I say, I was very familiar with Matt. He was a high achiever. Unfortunately, he had a bad knee injury at university, but we were training partners for a good few years, shared many a training trip together. Matt has never left or lost his passion for running. So much so, when he came out of university, despite travelling around the world, he then set up RunThrough events, which I know a lot of our viewers and listeners will be familiar with. RunThrough events is now one of the biggest event operators in the UK, if not worldwide. It certainly has the most events operating in the UK, and they've now expanded to trails. They're on the road, and they are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I think it's a true testament to Matt's passion for the sport, as well as his business partners Ben's passion for the sport. And our paths crossed again as friends and then business partners when we set up Runner Retreats, which we're still very proud owners of. And Matt now has a very big influence over New Levels Coaching, and we do a lot together on the coaching side of things as well. I thought there was no better guest to bring in to talk about all things related to work-life balance when it comes to training, and we'll go into a lot more detail about that. So first off, Matt, I always start by asking, what have you been up to recently? I think for you, that's been a little bit different to what you've normally been up to.
Yeah, recently, I suppose over the last few weeks, I ran a marathon. I've had a young child recently, Phoebe, and she's growing up, and seeing that happen. She's 5 months old now. I've been to Latvia for the IWF World Running Conference. We've organised events, the world's first free running event at Warrington, 6,000 people. Last week I ran Battersea Park doing a running festival with 2,000 people, helping out you guys behind the scenes with various things with Run Retreats and having conversations around that sort of stuff, and working with the amazing RunThrough teams to help build these events and grow new ones too. So there's lots going on personally from that perspective, and the marathon part of it, the running part of it, which is why you guys are listening in today, it's been quite interesting in the build up to it, and I think we'll touch on that later on. But yeah, that's what I've been up to.
And I kind of wanted to touch on that bit in particular around the marathon, and as I said, work-life balance. But one factor that has become more apparent in Matt's life is family life balance, which I know is a big thing for a lot of our listeners and viewers. And you're a very proud dad of Phoebe. Little Phoebe arrived this year. And obviously Lucy is still doing a cracking job. But Lucy is also running as well. She started her running journey again. She recently did a 10 miler. Is that right?
Yeah, she did a 10-mile race. And she has done, I think it's 3 marathon majors at this point in time. So she is a runner. She's been doing it, but she was originally a synchronized swimmer. So it's all new to her. But she's been working at RunThrough events since 2016, full time, I think since 2017. So she knows running events inside out, and we're around it all the time. And for me, having the little one, I'm probably not the best person to talk to about balance from that perspective. I think other dads will be better at that than me. But I've luckily to have an amazing wife that can kind of support me in the things that I'm trying to do in the sport and grow. And I'm learning how to balance myself a little bit with that.
And an amazing support network as well with your family. I think I see your now mum and dad who are now grandparents getting involved, and grandparents down south. But I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this, where it's still a major life change. Like you say, Lucy's very much hands-on mum and taking a little bit of a back step from work naturally, as they do with their maternity leave. And
she says that, but she's been full blown since the start. She was at events after 2 weeks since giving birth.
Amazing.
Yeah, so she's a bit of an anomaly, really, and that's probably the difference between like a normal structure and when you kind of have a business and the intensity of that sort of stuff. You do get dragged into things a little bit differently. And that's the thing to balance, and we're slowly getting used to having a little person just sitting there looking at us saying, "No, I need your attention, not the emails or the Facebook or the operations plans and staff members with issues." Like it's kind of like we're having to find new ways of dealing with that stuff in terms of hiring people and working with people who understand things. And I'm learning.
Well, I'm going to start there because I think I've been working a lot on my personal values recently. I've done a lot of work with sport and business psychologists over the last sort of year, 18 months, and I've really kind of dialed into these values, like what underpins us as humans. And I'm going to take a bit of a guess here at some of your values, knowing you as a person. You're a very friendly, upbeat person, and I know friends and family mean a lot to you. So you're going to have to factor that into the equation, especially with a newborn in there. But I know how much your running means to you as well, and I feel like that would be a big part of your values, particularly health and fitness and being healthy and fit. But then your work is such a passion of yours, and you're driven to succeed, and you're a hard worker. And I would say the value I would say that aligns to is growth. And I'm not having to dig at your height here.
You can talk.
We're not the tallest of men,
Got
Matt
like
and I.
half an inch on him, I reckon.
But what I mean is personal growth, in a sense of you always seem to be striving, not for more, because I think that's the wrong word. I think you're always striving to better yourself, and you do that very much in a work capacity. So they're my kind of visions of your values, certainly what I see. Am I along the right lines there, or have I missed something? And if I am along the right lines, how do you then make sure you get all those values into your lifestyle, and how are you balancing it?
Yeah, so I think on the last point there, the growth thing has been something that's been so important to me since I can remember. And when I first got the taste of, from a young age, and this is probably something like a parenting thing, if people are watching with kids, I was competing at 10, 11, 12, 13 in athletics events, but also football, and wanting to win and being in town teams and the local football clubs and just wanting to win at that point in time. And when I got to a point where I was conscious that if I did training, I would improve, and then obviously having conversation with my dad, who was also quite fit and healthy himself and racing and doing marathons, and watching him do that sort of thing was obviously inspiring. But then being around people who were also trying to better themselves in athletics, that was massive for me. So when I got to 15, 16, 17, after I'd already won national titles at younger age groups, so I got to 17 before Loughborough, I was coming up with my own training plans. I was researching, reading books, like autobiographies of famous runners, all of them, Ron Hill, Sebco, Yvette, Moorcroft, everything. I was reading the law of running. I was educating myself. I knew every single world record. I knew every single distance time that some of the top athletes have run over the last few years. I was so educated on the thing that I was passionate about, which was athletics and winning from that perspective. I wanted to know how to win. And at that point in time, my delusion was probably telling me that I was going to win the Olympics in about 4 years' time. And going to Loughborough would be that step to do that. So when I went to Loughborough, I was exposed to everyone else who was also thinking the same thing I was thinking, you kind of get a little bit lost in that. And when something doesn't go quite right, a session doesn't go well, a race doesn't go as good as you thought, then that kind of stunts it a little bit. And the growth mentality that I had from when I was younger was always there, but then I was trying to find hacks to fix that. And some of the hacks that I had was my eating and not being great with that, and trying to find ways to improve my VO2 max, because I did VO2 max tests. So I thought, right, if I decrease my weight, my VO2 max will improve, which means I'll run faster. But I was already probably at the limit of my weight, what I needed to be, because I was already eating reasonably healthy and training really, really hard. So those things in my mind it was always growth and improving. And then when I eventually got my injuries and I decided to stop running at a competitive level when I was 21, I think it was. 21. I then changed my mindset to business and building companies and doing all that sort of stuff. At the start, I didn't necessarily have the answers straight away, and it wasn't RunThrough at that point in time, because I hadn't had that conversation with Ben, and it was like a good 6-7 years of me exploring the world and starting things, getting things wrong. I had nightclub businesses. I had around 2 nightclubs in Leeds at one point. I had a sports massage therapy business in Melbourne, Australia, and I've done everything. Not only jobs, but businesses, and lost a lot of money, gained bits, and then over a period of time, you learn those experiences. And at the same time, I'm reading books. I'm listening to, well, it wasn't really podcasts back then, but it was more like audio books and physical books and that sort of stuff, and asking so many questions to everyone that I came across who were older than me, more experienced than me, and just absorbing things and never having the answer myself, almost playing dumb in a way. And I think by doing that, I gained more knowledge than thinking I knew it all.
That's a really good point around learning from other people. I think in our world, in the running world, there's a lot out there now, and it can be sometimes a dangerous game because there's so much out there. But I've kind of prided my coaching experience on learning from other people around me, always wanting to learn, listening to conversations, and picking the right things from people, and not being afraid to make mistakes, as well as you quite rightly pointed out. When you said, I've just picked up on something you said, I was exploring the world. I got the impression you were kind of exploring yourself as well. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, massively. Like, my whole identity was tied to running, and I had a real downtime when I realised I wasn't going to make the Olympics. I finished a race at Loughborough. It was the Bucks trials.
Remember it well.
Yeah. And my basically one of my best mates and my essentially roommates were in that race with me as well. Miles Barrett, Kieran Flannery, and we ran that race. And about 150 metres to go, I just stepped off the track. And I walked off, and I walked through the fields, and I cried my eyes out in the field, called my dad and said, it's over. And he probably knew it at that point in time, but I only just realised at 21 that I was never going to make the Olympics. And when that happened, it took me a while to get over that. In the year I had in between, I went to Camp America, basically. I missed my graduation, went to Camp America in the States, New York, met some amazing people, some of my best friends now that I met out there. And we spent 3 months just looking after the kids and running around the trails and doing weights in the gym and having drinks in the pubs, and just had a really good time. And I came back, and I thought, right, what do I want to do now? And what I want to do was go see the world again. But I thought I'd be smart about things. I did like a low conversion course. So I was still focused on my education to make sure I was doing the right things from that perspective. Did it locally to home to save money up for traveling. Got enough money for traveling. I was working at the same time. And then spent everything I had on a round the world ticket.
Having an amazing time around the world.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
And I think you become more cultured for that. I'm going to backtrack a little bit to the point where you said, that realisation of not making Olympics, something we touched on in an earlier podcast, the one I did with Gemma. I think it might have even been episode 1. So if you've not heard that one, go back and check it out. But we spoke about, or I certainly highlighted that it's almost a frustration of mine as a coach that this, exactly what you're describing, that people don't achieve the big goal that they're after. And quite often, with the raw emotion of it all, and it's totally understandable, we forget about the journey we've been on. And the journey you've been on to get to that point is still a massive achievement. You've set records, you've had international vests, you've met some amazing people, you've travelled the world, all through running, which wouldn't have happened if you'd not gone after the goal. Yeah. Yet we tie ourselves so closely to that one achievement, and we measure ourselves on it. Like you said, it's over. But the reality is, running wasn't over.
No.
You were going to take a break from it, and probably needed to, fair to say. But then you've gone full circle and you've come back to it, and you realise there's so much more to running. I think that's the message I want to get across to people: is there's so much more to running than being defined by one goal. It's so much more. It means so much more to us than that. And I think I keep using that word, fair to say. I think it is fair to say that you've now found that balance.
Definitely. Even just talking to you recently, and you being a competitive athlete, competing in the World Championships and doing fantastic things, to then now you still have that drive to try something new out, to compete at trails at a very high level and learn new skills is inspiring to see. And I went through that transition, but I was younger and a bit more immature, and I wasn't quite there yet. And I had, from 21 to 24, even though I was defined by running, I didn't hate it. I just didn't want to do it or talk about it.
Yeah.
So I talked with people in nightclubs and bars, and it wasn't through running. It was through me as a person. My personality was the reason why they were friends with me, not because I was a good runner as a kid, which was great to know that I had that in the locker as well. And then when I came back to the UK, and I'd started a business over here, and then I went to meet Ben for a coffee, and for a beer actually, and we discussed potentially doing something together. Running and RunThrough was still was just born then, because I was like, right, all these skills in organising events, all these skills in marketing. I had my own marketing agency at the time, and all these skills that I've learned over a period of time, combined with someone like him with his finance background and his passion for running as well, it aligned so well. And then from that point onwards, my passion for it all just zoomed back in.
Because it was always there. It was always inside. You'd kind of taken a break from it, but the underlying passion for the sport and running was always there. Because you'd check in with me. Yeah. You'd come travel with me. You came to Istanbul to watch me at the World Championships. Like, that passion for running was always there. It had maybe just taken a little bit of a back step, and unfortunately you and Ben got together. And they say when you find what you're passionate about and you make it your job, you don't work a day in your life. Yeah. And I know that is very much your mindset. I'm going to ask you for a couple of learnings here that maybe our audience can take from this. Certainly our younger audience. Hopefully there's some younger athletes tuning in and listening or watching on YouTube. What do you know now, as an older, mature athlete, that you would potentially do differently back in those, particularly between 15 and 19? Would you do anything differently? And what would you say you've learned that potentially would have made a difference back then?
I think I listened to too many people.
Okay, interesting.
So when I went to, I thought that other people had the answers, and the reality is I had the answers.
Yeah.
And when I was 17 and I was training at home, my old coach, Arthur, he was involved in my training, but it was really me making up the sessions and my dad advising me and talking about it with him. When I went to Loughborough, I thought these coaches of these other athletes had something that I could take to improve myself. So I thought, I've got me. I need your information, and then I will become X. But that's not the case. Like, I wasn't those athletes. I wasn't from their background. I wasn't from their situation. And one person's words aren't going to change the way you do things. You have to, this is my kind of thoughts, and I have to take people's advice. And if I don't need it, I don't need it.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish I'd have just stuck in my lane and done the mileage, which I should have done. I reeled things back. I became a runner who focused on quality rather than quantity, and I'm a quantity person.
Yeah.
In everything that I do. You know that from running events and the volume of work and everything, I'm quantity.
Yeah.
Because that's how I function better. But then to strip that back, the thinking time that I got off the back of that wasn't useful for me. And the quality work that I need to do, I'd already done when I was younger, and I didn't need it.
So this is a really fascinating point for me, because I remember somebody asked me, one of our friends said, what was the difference between yourself, Miles, Matt, at university? Why did some of you carry on? Why did some of you stop? And obviously injuries comes into that, particularly with yourself and Miles, who had quite bad injuries. But I said, look, if you look at it on an ability scale, we're all in and around the same sort of scale. There wasn't a real difference. Somebody might have a little bit more natural talent than somebody else. But when you get to that standard, what you usually find is a big group of athletes right in the same zone, and then there's the odd one or two outliers who we see. And we could give examples of that from our time, like a Ricky Sues, for example, seemed to me like he was just one of these kind of freaks of nature. Yeah. But then the rest of us all sat in this category, and then the friend in question said to me, well, what was the difference? And I said, well, I'll break it down. And I said, I'll use Matt as an example. And you've just absolutely hit the nail on the head. I said, I always felt like Matt was looking for answers that he already had. He was looking for the next magic bullet, and actually he just needed to be patient and do the work. But he fell into that trap, which we see so many people do now. They think that they've got to do something different, and the formula they have is already working.
Yeah.
And that's something we see, don't we, all the time with runners now. It's like, what can I do next? What can I change? What can I add in? Same with gym. What's the new gym fad? What's the new lift? And I think the overriding message there is sometimes patience is key.
Yeah, I think patience, but you have to trust the information you're getting. And one thing I didn't really trust was the information I was getting, because I think the information I had was already in my mind. I should have stuck to what I wanted to do, done my own training in my own time, and had the confidence. But if I hadn't done those things, I wouldn't have. I spent so much time with amazing people that I'm still in touch with, like yourself, and I would have had a different life. So you can't really. I don't look back at anything that I've done and say I would change it, because even though things might have been regrettable, or things that I didn't like at that point in time, or things that I think I'm not proud of, it made me who I am now. And the things I do now will make me who I am in 10, 15 years' time. So you can't look back like that, I don't think.
And that was going to be, you've kind of stolen my next question. Is like, would you actually go back and change it? I'm glad you've said it. Gemma and I always go to this because, for those of you who know Gemma, my wife, she went through a traumatic time in 2012 where she was diagnosed with cancer. And she quite openly says she wouldn't change that phase of her life. And people think she's lying. You know, why would you want to go through that treatment again, that horrific cycle, that horrific period of your life? But she says that she learned so much from herself, and it made her the person she is today. Yeah. And I feel like it's the same with you. Obviously, a totally different example, and people will have their own examples and own experiences. And I like to refer to it as like all these little things that you've done, all the mistakes you've made, all the learnings you've had, they're constantly just upgrading you. And it comes back to that value of yours, which is it's a growth value. 100%. You're 100% just growing the entire time. Again, not in height though.
So that's definitely something that I'm passionate about, like growing myself and taking in information from different places. And yeah, sometimes like the information that I get, I don't need, but sometimes the information that I get can change the course of my day or change the course of what could happen in the next 10 years. So you need to find the right people to listen to, but also not be afraid of listening to people that you don't know yet and that sort of stuff. But don't be afraid to push it away.
I think it's a really good lesson for people, you know, absorb it by all means, but then almost take some time to process it and think, what do I need? And actually, what do I just need to forget?
Yeah.
And but take the time to listen and learn. And you are brilliant at it. I mean, you're constantly sending me things like little reels or snapshots of things. And at first, I'll be honest, I used to get annoyed thinking, why is he sending me this again? Like, but then I know that that's how your mind works. You're saying to me, look, have a look at that, but don't necessarily act on it, but just have a look at it and see what you think. Whereas I used to think everything you sent me, you wanted me to act on it. I was like, God, now he wants me to set up a hairdressing business. What's he on about? But
that is true though, and I do it to. And Ben's been working with me for a long time, and he knows that. Like in my head, I think of myself as like almost like an AI in a way. Like I'm compiling data in my own brain by listening and watching and learning. And sometimes I need the sounding board of someone that I trust and respect the opinions of to say, no, that's silly, that's not silly. And if I don't get that feedback, then I'll just kind of maybe go on a spiral of thinking about it too much. And I also, at the same time, I'm trying to not upskill, but kind of educate the people around me the way I want things to go. And if I don't do that, and then I have a decision that needs to be made, and they don't have the information that I have, they won't make the same decision as me. They'll make a different one because they haven't had that information. So I'm at the same time like annoying you, but at the same time trying to like give information that I'm seeing to everyone that I know. And yeah.
To kind of set the scene here and give you a little bit of perspective on this, Matt jumps on a meeting with myself and Ben when we have a meeting together, and Matt joins with his note taker. Now, his note taker is an AI note taker, so he comes on with his little friend and we make a joke about it each week. But I think it kind of shows you that he even wants to make notes of the meetings in case he needs to go back and learn something from it. So the devil is in the detail in this, but you love it, you absorb it, and you go, yeah, I can go back to that if I need to. So that just gives people a little bit of an insight into your mindset.
Yeah, it's the same. People ask me, like, I've read all these books and all that sort of stuff, and I probably couldn't quote you one line from any of the books I've read, but I said to someone a few months ago, I was like, I've read these books, but I become the words that I read. I become everything that I absorb.
Yeah.
Maybe not that one thing, but everything together will become who I am. And yeah, I like to look back on stuff and reflect on conversations, because sometimes I'll say something that I don't know if I've even said, and I'll be like, well, that was pretty good. And I'm like, okay, that's good information for me to use for the next conversation. And yeah.
I like it. I like it. You become the words you are almost subconsciously. You forget what it said, but you've stored it internally and you're then acting and behaving like that. Yeah. Love it. Okay, you've mentioned Ben a lot. And for those who don't know Ben Green is co-founder of RunThrough, and obviously has a big part in sport retreats, runner retreats as well, which is great because we get to work together a lot. Ben and yourself set up RunThrough, and it's quite obvious from the conversations you have a very close relationship, but you became very busy men very, very quickly. You know, I just remember you guys going to event after event after event, driving vans up and down the countries and seeing RunThrough kind of explode really very, very, very quickly, which was great from where we were at Bushy Park in the first ever event and we come to help to where it is now. But it's your lives have changed quite substantially in that period of time. But what I do observe is you're still very busy, but you're not busy in a bad way. I never look at it and think that, oh my God, he's not got time for friends. Because you and Ben are always first any social occasion. You're always first to be there if you needed. You're never too busy to stop what you really want to do, which I think is a good sign. You're what I class as a good busy. You're busy for the right reasons, and you're busy because you're doing the thing that you enjoy. But one thing that does baffle me, and Ben is still a very good runner himself. I think he paced his brother to a sub 240 marathon in London, didn't he?
Casually, yeah.
Running with a GoPro as well, recording it. So Ben's still operating at a high level. You've just pretty much almost broken 3 hours for the marathon as well. So how are you guys balancing that? How do you look after your health and fitness alongside the work and alongside now your family life?
I think for Ben, I think it's always been part of his life. Some of you guys might have come across his dad, Graham Green, and just by looking at the man, you think he's in good shape.
Yeah, looks great.
He looks great. He's in his mid-50s, running 2:30s for marathons, and yeah, from a background and Ben's been from a background where he's never really stopped. He has had injuries, and he's had things that have stopped him from training, but the fact he's been consistently keeping himself fit and healthy. For Ben, a rest day is going to the gym. Like, he's got that mentality of where fitness is his life as well. And I've had that as well, but the reason why I haven't competed at a high level was my diet, essentially. And I enjoyed my food and my drink, and I always trained. I just didn't really think about those side of things. And so for the business and what we did with running events, we can't actually do the running events at the same time you're organising them. Now it feels okay because we've got staff members who go to the events and are doing the operations on those events, was where you don't have to do that, so we can go and run a few. We didn't run any events ourselves until like 2021, really. I think the first race I ever did was in 2021 or 2020.
The first RunThrough race.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we'd going for like 7 years. It's because we were driving the vans from London to Manchester, unloading vans, and the intensity of what we were doing, other people will think we're crazy, and the staff members that are with us on that ride at the start will have those stories in the locker for the rest of their lives, because we were doing something pretty exceptional. I ran about doing like 90 events, 90 to 100 events individually, driving vans up and down the country every single weekend, Saturday and Sunday, up at 3 o'clock, finishing by 4 or 5. Like, these are intense days. And in the week time, when we first started, I had my marketing agency, and Ben had his career at Unilever, and we were working from 5, 6 o'clock until 1, 2 in the morning together, like making websites, doing adverts, like replying to customer emails, everything. So we've always had that intensity about us. So now it feels like really easy, if I'm honest with you. Even though we have lots on, it's not the same. Like, I do feel, yes, there's lots going on, there's lots of things to think about, but I do have time to wake up and go for a run. I do have time to do my stretch every day. It's just a framing in your mindset of like, yeah, I'm busy, but that's important to me.
That was going to be my word. Do you feel like you still prioritize your running then, because it is important to you?
Yeah, I think recently, like as of the 3 hour marathon thing that I did recently, it's come about from me wanting to be a bit more consistent about the way I look and what I eat and put in my body. And for the last 6 months, I've been eating better. I've been going to the gym. I've been doing running a longer distance 3 times a week. But yeah, I've been more conscious of it rather than being an unconscious thing that I have done for the last years before that.
I'm going to go to that in a second around that conscious choice, because I do believe it's a conscious choice of how we look and feel about ourselves. And I took a lot of learnings from you in that example. But I'm also going to just backtrack ever so slightly and try and relate this analogy to the runners who we work with about RunThrough. So RunThrough celebrated its 10th birthday, right in saying, this year. So 10 years, and you're describing the first kind of years and said, it took me 7 years of operating at RunThrough before I actually ran a RunThrough race. Because up until that point, I was pretty much still working all the events, digging your hands in. So runners, how does this relate to you? Well, one of the most common mistakes we see with runners is they want quick fixes. They want to skip the basics. They want to get to the level that they want to be at too quickly. And it's the same with businesses. It's why a lot of businesses fail. They're not willing to put the groundwork in themselves, do all the hard work, what we refer to as the base building phase, and build that really strong pyramid. But you've just described it perfectly at RunThrough. What you and Ben did really well with your team at RunThrough is you built this amazing base that now is being laid on top of. And the bigger you build that base, as we said in the last podcast with Matt Long, the bigger you build that base, the higher the peak can go. And guess what? RunThrough's peak is still going up and up and up because this base is now there. And our runners and our listeners can certainly relate to this by thinking, well, if you skip that base period, things will crumble, just like a business. It'll start to fall apart. But if you work hard on it, and if you are patient, then you will be able to get to that peak. But it does take time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And sometimes it is. You do think, okay, I want to run a sub 4-hour marathon, for example, and you think, okay, I can do that within this period of time. But if you haven't done the year before that of just basic zone 2, easy running to get yourself fit and active, you're probably not going to do it. And you're going to be disappointed when you get to this goal day and then don't meet it. And yeah, the same thing in business, the same thing in everything. You need to build that strong base of time and effort and attention on one thing. And I think I've taught myself again the last 9 months, I suppose, is that I needed to do that consistent thing. So I forced myself to go to the gym 3 times a week, even though I don't like it. I don't like doing leg weights. It is really boring.
Amen to that.
But the benefits of doing it have been so much better. And at the same time, if I could combine that with maybe a vain goal of looking a bit better when I look at myself in the mirror, and it means I can do 3 runs but do them a bit longer, and then do 16-mile, 20-mile, 22-mile run to then do a marathon. That's not something I would have done before in that structured way. So yeah, building the base, being thoughtful and consistent is massive.
Okay, let's talk about that. We refer to it as purposeful practice, being thoughtful about what you do. And like you say, we don't enjoy everything we do. I think that's a misconception. People, might look at you and think, oh, Matt's in great shape now. He's eating well. He's going to the gym 2-3 times a week. He must love the gym. And as you say, you don't necessarily love the gym.
No.
But it's part of your makeup. It's back to those values. It's something that you feel passionately about. I worked with Sports Psych this year, and I learned a lot around kind of the Steve Peters model around the Chimp Paradox, which I know a lot of people will have heard of. And what I started to figure out about that, which I didn't realize the first time I read the book, was that your chimp can be a good and a bad thing. And I used to think it was all just a bad thing. And I have a strong value in health and fitness, as you do, and I actually like to feel good, not necessarily look good, but sometimes when you do look good or you think you look good, that makes you feel better as well. So and what I mean by that is I don't want to be overweight, and I don't want to be overweight because I don't feel like I like myself for look in the mirror, and I don't hope that doesn't come across arrogant. I know a lot of people will think the same thing, and I know you do because we had this discussion. But also, my chimp can sometimes say to me, I can get up out on a morning and my chimp screaming, oh, stay in bed, give yourself that extra 10 minutes. But I've got to recognize that at that point in time, it's my chimp that's acting. But if I go to my human, me, Lewis, I've got to realize that I actually want to get out the door and I actually want to run because I want to look good. And I want to, ultimately, I want to feel good. And I know I feel better after I've ran. And then we go to the gym. I also know that the gym is going to allow me to do the running. And the biggest thing we get from people is, how do you stay motivated to do the things that you don't like doing? So how do you do it?
I don't think I'm motivated. I think I'm surprisingly disciplined for someone who comes across probably not so much. When I wasn't disciplined with my own eating and my own health, I was extremely disciplined with my business and my work. The time and effort and attention I put into that sort of stuff, no one will see that stuff that I did, but I did it. And now I'm putting a bit more attention of that into my fitness. And yeah, I don't think I'm motivated to go to the gym or motivated because I didn't have a marathon goal time. I just wanted to do a marathon. And I knew I could run a marathon because I could go run one whenever I wanted to because I can get around it because I've done it 3 times before.
Yeah.
Not to a fast pace, but I've done it. So it wasn't motivation. It was just being strict with myself. And the major thing for me, the turning point, was in COVID. So as soon as that happened and I lost all the events and we essentially didn't have a business because the only thing in COVID that you didn't want to do is bring people together. And that was our entire business. So that was a real reflective point, and it changed a lot in my brain to do with RunThrough. It also changed a lot in my brain to do with me personally. And I went on this streak where I said, I'm going to stretch every single day, because for years I've been saying I'm always injured. My knee always swells up. I've had 2 knee operations. So I've had no cartilage in my left knee as well. So I've not got the best grounding for that, but I made excuses up. I told myself, like, I want to stay in bed. I didn't do that, but I told myself I couldn't run a long distance because my knee hurts.
Yeah.
So I thought, no, I'll try something I haven't tried before. So I stretch every single day for 25 minutes. And I've done that now since, well, it's over 3.5 years now.
Yeah.
Like consistently every day. And the only days I've missed was 2 days on 2 different stag do's, including my own one night.
And that's because we were stretching on the dance floor. So.
That was it, yeah. So that 2 days in 3 years of not doing a conscious effort to stretch every day. And don't get me wrong, I'm not looking forward to getting up and doing a stretch. And sometimes when I'm traveling and I'm on a plane and I've got to get to the hotel room and it's 11 o'clock at night, I've got to do my stretch.
Because routine, it's habit.
I have to do it.
Yeah.
I can't break that streak. And I've got that one. And the book, Atomic Habits.
Yeah, James Clear, yeah.
That book, I read that book around that time, and it just something stuck in my mind. And I was like, you need to build on one habit, build on one thing. And that stretching for me was that. Then everything else has been built on top of it. So my fitness has improved, my mindset's improved, like everything has improved since I had that one core thing. And yeah, I think that it's not, for me, motivation, it is discipline.
So there's a really famous saying, I think it came from the High Performance podcast actually, but I know Jake Humphrey did mention it in the High Performance podcast live show that we went to. And they say that motivation comes from action, from taking action, not vice versa. But people think that they're just going to get motivated. Like one day they're going to jump out of bed and go, woohoo, yeah, I'm motivated. But actually, it's actually taking the first step and taking action that then leads to the motivation, like getting into your stretching routine. And people might sit here and think, oh, well, I need to stretch every day to stay injury-free. And a lot of physios will tell you at the minute, the research says that stretching doesn't help performance. I think it's more about understanding what you need as a person. I know that stretching for me provides me with a little bit of me time and a little bit of almost meditation and breathing. So that's why I do it. And often with these things, if you think they're helping, they often do help. Yeah. And like you say, there's other factors that are contributing to you running injury-free, including going to the gym and doing your strength work and probably managing your intensity a little bit better, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that something you've changed?
Massive part of it as well. Because when I was competing at a high level, your sessions were Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and these were intense. The hill sessions, the track sessions, and even the weight sessions you're doing, you're pretty intense. Whereas now it's just very casual. For me, running a 3-hour marathon based on 3 runs a week and 3 gym sessions, and those gym sessions, they're not like runner gym sessions. They are literally beach body, bench press, shoulder press gym sessions.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I'm lucky in the sense that my genetics and my background has helped me get to a point where that's easy. Whereas some people who aren't doing that, it might be a different scenario. They might have to do that intensity to get themselves to a point where they're fit enough to manage that sort of thing. But I think I'm kind of fortunate from that perspective.
Well, again, it comes back to that base. You've got years of aerobic base building behind you. And people are sitting and go, well, I can't relate to that because I couldn't run 3 days a week and do 3 gym sessions a week and run a 3-hour marathon. But there are always things you can relate to. And I think slowing down that intensity is one. Now, I'm going to ask you about the marathon itself because I know you've run a marathon in London before. So what were some of the biggest changes you made on marathon day that helped you perform better that our listeners and viewers could also learn for their marathon performance?
I'd say I knew what my fitness levels were before the start of it. So getting that baseline, understanding from your coach where you're at. And I think the guidance from your coach from that perspective is massive because they'll be able to see your sessions. The reason why at New Levels we tell people to upload their stats to Final Surge isn't just for the fun of it. It's so the coach can see the information and see the heart rate and see the intensity that you're doing your training at. And then they can work out what pace to run in a marathon distance. And because of my background, sports science, Loughborough, all this sort of stuff, I've got that innately. And I knew that at that point in time. So the marathon I did when I was unfit and healthy, I just chanced it. I thought, people can run 3:15 that I'll need to do 3 hours.
So this is a good point. So you thought people who I usually beat or I run with can run 3:15. So the classic comparing yourself to other people, which is what people do.
Yeah.
I've got a friend at the running club who I train with, and they've ran 3:30 or they've ran 4:30 for marathon. I'll be able to do the same.
Yeah.
Mistake number one.
Huge mistake.
Yeah.
I was for my body weight and for my I was overweight for what I wanted to do. And I know that's not nice to say, and sometimes it's not the way running should be, and any way anyone else can run, and it's not about that. But for me, in my moment and the time I wanted to run, I was. So that I didn't prepare. I didn't prepare correctly.
I think that's the big word there.
And when I'm talking like eating
Yeah.
Domino's pizzas and kebabs like 2 or 3 times a week, it wasn't the best preparation.
And that's probably going to impact like your knee injury.
Exactly.
Because you're carrying more weight relative to yourself.
100%.
And again, it's not about, we're not telling people not to eat because you've got to fuel a lot when you go to the marathon. But what we're saying is you've got to fuel properly and you've got to respect your body and you've got to know your own body.
Yeah, definitely. And the pacing is something that even in the marathon, the Chester Marathon that I did a couple of weeks ago, I had you in my mind at about halfway, because Lewis always preaches to his athletes and all the other coaches that work at new levels is that pace yourself, negative splits. And it's so true. And the feeling that I got knowing my current fitness and doing a negative split and coming through so fast at the end compared to everyone else was the best. It was such a good feeling. Even though I didn't run like what everyone thinks is an amazing time of sub 3 hours, one, I didn't care. I wanted to do a good marathon time, and I did that. I felt amazing for that last 5K was like about sub 20 minutes or something. I was powering past people.
Yeah. And
that was massive for me. So at the time in that London Marathon I went through in sub 90 when I was probably in 235, 240. Sub 90 when I was in 330 or 340 shape.
Yeah.
Whereas I knew I was probably in at least 310 shape here today. So going through halfway in 93 was fine.
Yeah, so I was tracking you and I seen you just gone through in 93, so you were just inside 307 pace through halfway.
Yeah.
And then you finished in?
It was 302, on my Garmin was 302, but official time was 303, so it was 303.
So 303, so just to put that into perspective, you then ran inside 90 minutes for the second half. Yep. Because you just dipped inside 90. So you went 93, 90. Now, in an ideal world, we'd get that negative split a bit closer together. But what I like about it is you played it safe and you ran cautiously, which allowed you to finish strong. And I asked you the question, how did you feel after? And you said, well, didn't feel too bad, actually. My quads were a bit sore a couple of days after. I gave myself 5 to 6 days off. But this is what we want to preach to the people who are running is, they're able to get back into running because they've not destroyed themselves by running the kind of wrong way. But more importantly, majority of the people that we coach, they do it for an enjoyment factor because it's such an important part of their life. Now, they may have time goals associated with that, absolutely. And we'll say this is still the best strategy to try and achieve that time goal. But what it'll allow you to do, it will allow you to enjoy the marathon. Where so many people come away from the marathon hating every step because all that they remember is the last 5K, which was so painful because they hit the so-called wall. And as you quite rightly point out, you can run your fastest 5K at the end of a marathon.
Definitely. And I would recommend doing it that way every single time. It's just so much more fun. Unless you're competing at a level to win a race or at the front end, like I don't see the point. Like it's a long way. You get to half marathon, and that's a half marathon. That's a long way to run.
And you've still got half left.
And you're just halfway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think if you can do one thing in a marathon, it's just forget about the times. You want to enjoy it. Listen to your coach. They're going to give you the right advice and the right time that you're going to run. Just copy that. Like, it's so simple.
We talk about having like 5% of the energy focused on the time and then 95% focused on the process and your values. And again, that comes back to one of them being enjoyment. I want to enjoy this. But if you get too obsessed with that time and you start running to split, again, we discussed this on the last podcast with Matt Long, people become obsessed with splits, and we know they're not always accurate anyway in marathons, but it can really like mess with your mind. And that is a problem in itself when it comes to marathon.
Like I think I can say this now in hindsight with years of experience and say, just do it that way. But the reality is I didn't push myself to my limit of what my body could do. I probably could have run about 255 or 250 or something, probably. And when I was younger, all I cared about were times.
Yeah.
All I cared about was pushing myself and beating people and running fast reps and improving. and that's in the locker now. So you can't just say, I watch podcasts sometimes and you see these really rich business people talk about their morning routines and how amazing they are and what particular things they do. Reality is when they were building their businesses, they weren't doing any of that stuff. They were just working really, really hard, not caring about anything or anyone to build that business. And the same thing for the best athletes. They can talk about it now on an elite level when they've got the best physios, the best coaches, the best trainers. But they weren't doing that when they were 16, 17, 18. They were grinding.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can talk about it from that perspective. But if you are running recreationally for fun in a major marathon, like, enjoy it.
And I'll add to that and say, so if you're going out there for fun, enjoyment, and you want to enjoy it, then yes, there's a strategy there that you can take and you can learn from. But also, if you're out there to compete at your highest level, it's all relative. Doesn't matter what level that is, whether you're looking to break an even number, which it always is, whether you're looking to go under 5 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, it's always round numbers. You've got to, I'm going to go back to Matt's point here, the most common mistake we see people make with marathon training, I would say almost any endurance event, is the reason they fail is because they're underprepared. And underprepared can also be relation to pacing, because they get their pacing wrong. They didn't do enough preparation around how they were going to pace that race. But it can be fueling, it can be the training, it can be cutting corners, it can be going to hacks. So for the people who are a bit more time bound, or they may be chasing a qualifying time, what I would say to you is do everything that you can to prepare yourself in the best possible way, but then trust, and you used that word before, trust your strategy if you've got a coach, or trust the strategy that you are putting in place yourself and execute it on the day. Because one of the mistakes people make, as you made in London, is they then feel good on the day and they go, oh, you know what, I'm just feeling good, I'm just going to roll with it.
Yeah, you did. And the tendency was there for me on the weekend, and that compared myself to, like, there's a group pack in front of you. You think, oh, they're going quite a similar pace to us. I'll chase that pack, or you'll stay with that pack, and they go a bit quicker than your expected time. And you think, oh, that's okay, I'll go with it. But on the Chester event, I went, no. I shook my arms, took a big breath, and let them go.
Love that.
And I did that on numerous occasions. And I think, obviously, nowadays with watches and heart rates, having that information is amazing. It's a tool. Like, I know we talk about not racing with watches and not thinking about those sort of things.
But it can help.
It really did help me, because I knew when my heart rate was getting to 160, I was going, okay, that's heading towards my uncomfortable zone.
Yeah.
I had to get back down to the 150s. I could push myself in the last 5-10K if I need to. But I was controlling my race with that heart rate.
Yeah.
And if I knew I was shooting up to 170, 180, it was game over. And I need to just jog.
Yeah.
And walk.
I think that's a really good place to finish, is that, you know, technology can help us at times, but I really like the way that you brought something that, you know, psychologists would refer to as like a calming method, almost meditation whilst you're running, a breathing technique to take a deep breath. Some people talk about like 2 short puts in and 1 long breath out to calm the central nervous system, but also just to take that, almost that mental realization of, okay, what's going on here? What do I need to do? How do I need to react in this situation? What that shows to me as a coach is you're in full control. Yeah. You weren't running anybody else's race. You're like, I'm in control of this, and I'm listening to myself, my body. I'm taking in the split, but I'm also listening to my body. And that for me is the most important factor. So lots of learnings there from one episode. I hope you've enjoyed that. Massive thanks to Matt, because he's shared a lot of information there and a lot of personal information. So thanks for going quite deep there, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Great to be on. I've enjoyed the last few podcasts you've done over the last few weeks. I'm looking forward to see what comes up over the next few months.
Well, what is coming up? So we're going to talk all things marathons as we build into Valencia. Valencia Marathon is kind of the last huge major marathon of the year. I'm so sure there'll be some super fast times there. The Valencia half has just been. So we're going to talk a lot more about marathons. We're also going to focus a little bit more on the trails and ultras. Some of our Team NLC athletes are going to finish off their trail and ultra season as they head into 2024, as they aim towards UTMB. And as always, our aim is to provide you with lots of inspiration and lots of learnings for you to take away so you can quite literally run with it. So hopefully you've had a lot of those today. We will catch you all again very soon. Best of luck to everybody racing. Enjoy your training, and we'll see you all again very, very soon.